I'm Michael Wargo, team pilot with Precision Aerobatics and Hobbyking. Today we're going to do a supplemental video to my landing videos. I've done tips on landing, and then I did a tip on or a video on landing turbine jets. Well, we had a request to do a video for landing a heavy aircraft, a difficult to land aircraft, something that has a tendency to tip stall and is pretty heavy. And over the years, I've had some real challenges with some really heavy warbirds or jets that are a little heavy. Especially the smaller jets, they don't have the good wing loading that this jet has. So there are a few differences in how to land them. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you, first of all, the first big thing is that flying this thing like a full-scale pilot would fly it. Tom here, who's holding the camera, was telling me that, in every airliner, they have gates that they need to fly through. The last one is at 500 feet, where they need to make sure that they call that the plane is stable at 500 feet, or they have to go around. And that's a great rule here. If you don't hit your marks, go around, because it's very hard to save a really heavy plane if you don't have a good approach. The key to a good approach that is with a very heavy plane, and is so important, is that it is long and low. Fly out further, get down below 15 or 20 feet a lot sooner. Because if you're above 15 or 20 feet over the runway, when you're diving down at the runway, you're going to gain speed that you don't want. You're going to be slow enough that you don't have a lot of elevator control, which is even worse. The actual way to do it is you make your approach low, and I'm going to try and simulate that with this plane, although this is not a heavy aircraft, but we're going to make a nice long low approach. We're going to fly at a stable speed. You don't have to be super slow. Fly at a safe, stable speed. You can even be a little fast going into that last turn, because the turn itself will slow the aircraft down. And if you're fairly slow and not too fast, you'll obviously be on the power, which you fly the plane down. So you'll have a little bit of power, and you'll be having a lot more speed than I always recommend when you enter the actual runway where you can land. You'll have a little more speed. You will land a little further down the runway, but it's a lot safer. Now, you really only want to start slowing down when your plane is 3-4 feet off the ground. What we don't want to do is be 7 or 8 feet and then having to make that last little dive, because again, it causes all kinds of problems. The other thing that is spectacularly important is you land on high rates. I cannot stress this enough. So many people I know land on low rates. I've said it before, it is categorically wrong. If your rates are set up properly, it should be very docile. And when do you need all the deflection? When is the time where you need the most deflection? Is when the plane is slow. If you are slow and the plane is starting to tip stall or is starting to get a little wonky and is starting to not respond, you need all the throw you can get. If you take your control and say, well, I'm going to land, but the one thing I want to give up is control, so I'm just going to throw that away and throw away this much aileron or elevator control. To me, it's very foolish. Just make sure you have your high rates set up properly so that they're kind of smooth at the beginning. And that's the way I set mine up. I always take off and land on high rates, as I've said before, for the simple reason that it is always possible that I'll have a flame out or something will happen that I'll need all I can get. It hasn't happened once, it's happened 50 times. So the one thing for certain, it is going to happen in the future, and it will happen to you if you land on low rates long enough. Anyway, let's do some flying, and I'll try and show you the best I can what I'm talking about. Okay, right now I'm slowing down, and I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. You can see the airplane is slow. I do have power, but I'm flying slow. If this plane was a very heavy aircraft, I'd want to be just where I am now. Low, with a manageable speed, just like this. And now immediately drop it down. Use that altitude, gets a little bit of airspeed, and I can start playing with the throttle now. even coming out. Now I'm low enough that I could literally land anything. So I'm going to just do a go around. But that's the idea. You see how high I am right now? Well, really I don't need to be any higher than that to fly. So here's the first big marker if I'm flying a really heavy plane.
Timer start. Timer stop.
Second marker would be right there. And now get down towards the runway. Now just fly it. I have power on and I'm flying. And now I could just drop it down at any time I want, but you can see this plane is much faster than I normally land. So theoretically I could just fly it to the ground. Okay, I'm going to do something that, normally I would not do, and I don't have much wind, if any at all. I'm going to land with first flaps, which I wouldn't do. And I'm also landing with the plane heavy. It's still pretty heavy with fuel. And I'm going to follow my own advice. I have very little flaps, and I'm going to follow my own advice. If I am not perfect, I'm going to go around. Because we're going to pretend this plane is very heavy. I'm back on high rates. I'm low. Nice and slow. I'm going to power into this turn because I don't want to slow too much. I'm flying. I'm flying at a nice manageable speed.
Timer stop.
Now I want to drop it down low if I can. And I can. And now, like I said, I can just fly it to the ground. And I'm going to keep the speed. It's just going to land a little longer than normal. I definitely took a chance, to try and demonstrate this, but of course I would never land that plane that fast. It was purely for demonstration purposes. I want to show you what an actual good landing looks like and a slow landing, so you can see the difference between how slow I would be coming in normally compared to the heavy aircraft. I'm literally just going to take off, go around and land. So now what I'm shooting for, obviously, is to keep the plane nice and slow and low. Here's my turn. The real trick here is to fly at a manageable speed that you can continue to fly. Manageable, not too fast or too slow. Now you can see with full flaps how much slower the aircraft is. And this is perfect for that. I'm still nice and low the way I want to be. But the aircraft itself has a lot less speed coming in. And you'll watch and see how much more runway I have and how much prettier this, landing it slowly like I preach is. There you go. This is my friend Ed. He's flying an F-7F Tiger Cat. That is only his second flight, and he's kind of been complaining that it's a bit heavy and stuff. So we're going to film his landing, which is a coincidence because I'm doing this particular video today on landing a heavy aircraft. As you can see here, he's high. Now all that altitude has turned into additional airspeed. You see he's already over the runway, he's coming down fast, and now that speed, when he added elevator, instead of kind of bringing the nose up, it flew the plane up again. And then of course he added power and went through a cycle and went around. Now you can see here he's high again. He gets down a little bit lower, but he locks it in there at about 8 feet rather than 3 or 4 feet. And now you see how fast it fell. In this case, he was still a little bit too high. And then, of course, the plane just dropped like a rock because he lost speed while he was still 5 feet up, rather than slowly flying it to the ground. And as you can see, he also didn't have high rates, so that meant he couldn't bring the nose up when he needed it. Now this landing was really, really nice. He is, right now you can see he's dropping and he's nice and low. And you can see now he's at a good height to just fly the plane in and let it stall at the ground. Okay, this is my esteemed videographer and pilot, Tom Schultz. He's flying his in, and you know, we discussed him flying it in a little hotter and so on to watch it just kind of drive it into the ground. But you see how he's controlling his altitude throughout. Beautiful. And that's really the way to do it with a heavy aircraft. Beautiful. This is my F-15. You've seen this clip before. But as you can see, this plane has to come in a little fast. So as you can clearly see, I am fairly low over the runway. You can see I still and the approach and everything is fairly level. And of course you can also see I'm using high rates to keep that nose up. Even though it's a jet that normally would want to be landing. This is another clip that you can see I clearly made a mistake. I was too high. But as I slowed down too high, watch the plane drop like a rock. But the point to this one is, if I would not have had high rates at that point, look at that. There's no way I would have saved this aircraft. If I would have been landing on low rates, it would have been physically impossible. This plane is very heavy for its size. There's really never a better example of why you need high rates than this. Look at how sharp that plane is coming in, and look how high I had to bring the nose to arrest that sink. But I pulled it off only because I had high rates. If not, I would have just smashed it. Here is another example of a terrible mistake. Look how high and sharp coming down. If this plane was a really heavy plane, this would have been catastrophic. But even with this, look at all that airspeed that came from that extra altitude. Barely made it. I love this example. It is a very heavy F-14 twin turbine. And you can see how high it is and how this altitude just turned into extra airspeed. And it was just a critical mistake. It made it down, obviously, but you could see how fast it was going, and it was just not very controlled, and it was so heavy as he had to put the nose down and flare it up. It actually hit the ground pretty hard and broke the gear. Here it is again in real time. You can see how fast he's going and so on and so forth. If he would have started this approach much lower, he would have had no problem landing the jet properly. Okay, here's my twin 30cc Tiger Cat that was having all kind of problems, and the flaps were messed up. This plane is very heavy. It was ballooning. So I had to follow my own advice, which is do a nice long, low approach. But look how nice it eventually came in. The big takeaway here is it took 80 feet to drop about 3 feet. And that's the right way to do it.